Well, I'm Noah Bassil. I'm the Associate Dean High Degree Research for the Faculty of Arts. I also have a position in my home department of Modern History, Politics and International Relations. And I work in the areas around international politics, Middle East, North Africa, the rise of populism, racism, those sort of areas. So I still have a research agenda, but most of my work is now focused on the high degree research programs in the Faculty of Arts, principally the BPhil, MRes, and the PhD, which I think I'm going to talk about today with you.
That's right. That's right. So one of the questions that we wanted to ask you is, why do you think someone should do the MRes?
Okay, it's a great question. I mean, the MRes, the BPhil MRes, so the 2-year program, which consists of a year of undergraduate but high level coursework study and a year of thesis, that is intensive research on a specific research topic, is a fantastic program developed really to provide students with 2 potential courses or trajectories after they finish their study. The first is to go into a PhD, and the BPhil MRes has a lot of components in it which are specifically about research training. And then secondly, as well, if they want to skill up and get a higher level vocational skilling for transferal into the workplace. So, for example, a lot of the research skills that we teach students in the BPhil MRes are really applicable for many job, a lot of job options and for workplaces. You know, whether it's the mixed methods, whether it's deep analytical research skills, whether it's self-directed learning. We know that there's a lot of evidence that employers are seeking students or graduates with high-level skills in these areas.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, that's actually a segue to the next question, which was, in what ways does the MRes prepare students for the workplace? So you've already said a little bit about that, but if you had other examples of how it prepares students for work on one hand, and also how it prepares them for further research. So if you could give us some specific examples for either, that would be great.
So, I mean, one of the things that I probably should have mentioned the last answer was that it's also a great cohort experience. It's an opportunity to work closely with a particular academic, a specific academic on a project, but also with a small group of students who are all part of a cohort moving towards the same outcome. So, you know, as an undergraduate student, many undergraduate students that I'm speaking to now will be in large cohorts. They'll be dispersed throughout. They'll have some peers that they have common classes with, but they won't run their program through with a small group of people that they'll get to know really well, develop their ideas and their identity as students with very closely. The BPhil MRes provides that opportunity. So you get that sense, I guess, of working closely with people, both in terms of working closely with an academic, but also with a small group of people. Now, in many ways, those things replicate the sort of environments people will go into when they go into a workplace. So there's one aspect of how it prepares people for the workplace. Secondly, there's a lot of emphasis given to independent learning in the BPhil MRes. So it's an opportunity for students to take on a project and from really very early on to start thinking through how to develop a project, to see it right through to its culmination in the submission of a thesis in the second year. Again, many workplaces aspire to have workers who can do that. Take a project, start from scratch, develop it, project manage it, design it, and then see it through to submission. And to demonstrate that to an employer, that you've been able to achieve that to an employer, I think is a really positive attribute. And then there are all the other transferable skills that come through, whether it's quantitative methods or whether it's interviewing. There's a whole range of skills depending on the discipline that students are enrolled in that they'll develop at a much higher level, but also implement in the production of the thesis. So not only are you learning how to do quantitative methods, you're applying it in a big project. And to take that out to an employer and to say, yes, I've learned X, and here's the evidence that I can apply it, I think is a stronger set of skills and attributes than students who come out of an undergraduate degree can demonstrate.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And I think it's interesting to hear about those transferable skills, but also some of the highlights. So I'll come back to this because we also want to know some of the highlights. But before I get into it, could you also tell us a little bit more specifically what the MRes actually entail? So,
Yes.
So what does it entail for students?
Okay, great. So students who go from undergraduate, 3-year undergraduate degree or 4-year undergraduate degree to the Big Phil will transition into a first semester that's fairly highly structured. They'll do specific coursework units that are, coursework units are specifically designed to enhance their disciplinary knowledge, but they'll also be undertaking a number of units that are dedicated towards research skills development. The first semester is usually a lot more focused on the high-level knowledge acquisition. And then second semester is really a transition semester into independent learning or high-degree research learning. So you do 4 units in first semester. All students will do 4 units if they're full-time in each semester. In the first semester, they'll do a core disciplinary unit, a research theme unit. There'll be a unit that's part of a full year offering that allows them to develop their own research identity and skills. And then a fourth unit in the first semester, which is and a research paradigms unit, which is a unit that covers all the main research theoretical and methodological sort of frameworks that are common to the arts, the humanities, and the social sciences. And it's a way of getting students to grapple with the different approaches to the big questions that they'll be researching in their theses. And in the second semester, the transition really is into 4 units that is about shaping their capacity to be independent learners. So they will have a core disciplinary unit, but the other 3 units are really designed around or have been designed to help them develop their own research projects. So there's a research communications unit. The second half of the FOAR 7002, again, a lot of scope for independent learning and shaping one's own research identity. And then a either-or option set that is around the transferable skills that I spoke about before that are also necessary for being a good researcher. So the year is really designed to transition students from the really structured coursework that they're used to as undergraduates to being an independent researcher by the time they get to MRes Year 2, and doing that gradually rather than in one big hit. And that's one of the issues that many students who did honours, I was an honours graduate, you probably were too, Ava, where we went from structured coursework, suddenly dropped in to writing your own thesis without really any transition at all. And that was a huge leap. Well, we've taken a little bit of that out in the BPhil MRes through this process of gradual introduction to being an independent learner and researcher.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I agree. It's my experience of, I actually went from a bachelor to a master's, and it was master's by research, and I had no coursework. So I can really appreciate this idea of transitioning and scaffolding. So it's a fantastic experience for the students. I also really like what you said about the cohorts and the sense of community. I think that's important for researchers and HDR students. And I was wondering if you could talk about some of the other highlights of doing the MRes.
Yeah, the cohort 1 is a highlight. I mean, there's a lot of evidence in the sector, not just in Australia, but internationally, that one of the major reasons for why HDR students failed to complete their projects was a sense of isolation. A huge amount of evidence. I mean, up until about a decade ago, the non-completion rates for PhDs and Masters by Research internationally were around 30 or 40%. Now, as a result of the introduction of the MRes, Macquarie's been able to bring that down to 9%. Great. So when I started my PhD, I was told that only 1 or 2 out of every 3 students that would begin would finish their PhD. Well, we don't say that as a message now. Our message is over 9 out of 10 students who start a PhD will finish. And a lot of the reasons for that is that we've introduced this program that gives students a sense of cohort and a capacity to gradually develop themselves as higher degree research students. And the reason, I think, one of the reasons that it's been successful is that students, one of the highlights for every student, if not the highlight, is the submission of the thesis at the end of the second year. And the fact that almost all our MRes students complete, that is, we have a very, very high submission rate and completion rate. I think last year it was up around 95% of students who in the university, and the Faculty of Arts had one of the highest completion rates. The MRes means that students have that experience of submitting something and the anxiety of waiting for the reports to come back and the elation of getting good results. And that feeds into their desire to do a PhD. If you've not had that experience, it's very hard to understand what you're going to go through. So that's one of the highlights. The other highlight is our Research Frontiers 2 conference. So every year for all our second year students, we run a full conference where they present a 10-minute paper on their research to the entire MRes Year 2 cohort. And we get supervisors and students and PhD students attending. So it's a big 3 or 4 day event that we run. And students every year have said that's been one of the highlights of their entire experience as a student. And it is a great event. So we run that every year. We put a lot of effort into it. It's a real faculty showcase event for the faculty. And the other highlight, I think, that a lot of students have fed back to me is their sense of becoming a researcher, of understanding what it means to be a researcher as a result of the MRes. I mean, as a PhD researcher, I don't know what your experience was, Ava, I really didn't understand that, what it meant, until I was probably in my 2nd or 3rd year of my PhD, and then it was all over. Well, these students are saying that they are PhD fully prepared to be a researcher, and for them that's a highlight. They take that maturity of knowing what it means to be a good researcher into their PhD from day one. From an institutional level, if I could say, that's the highlight for us. And that's why I think we've had such great results with the MRes students transitioning into PhD.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually really great to hear. And I can relate to the last 2 points that you made about learning about your identity, about a researcher, what it means, and also what you said earlier about having those kind of events. And it goes back to the sense of community, showcasing your work, being able to talk about your work, but also networking with other researchers and being part of that community. I think you also started answering something that I was wondering, just listening to you, which was the feedback that you're receiving. You know, when you're talking to the students, could you tell us a little bit more about this? What do you hear from them? What kind of feedback are you getting? What do you think the experience is?
Oh, look, now I've been involved with the program since it began in 2013. And overall, I think I can say that the feedback from students of the program, their experience of it, and how it's been formative for them has been incredibly positive. We've had a lot of students who have said, look, as a result of the MRes, I've decided not to do a PhD. You know, I thought I wanted to do one, but I actually think that it's not for me. And they've completed their MRes Year 2 and gone out into industry in some form, community, NGOs, the private workplace, and they've really fed back to us the sense of certainty about what they were doing. And they think, for a number of them, they think that both having the MRes as a qualification, but also the experience of the MRes has really benefited them as they've gone into the workplace. We've had a few people say to us, and it's fed back to me through supervisors and MRes directors and not directly from students, but that some students have said that they've been able to begin a professional career at a higher level, they believe, than they would have otherwise been able to do because they completed the MRes. One of the best bits of feedback I received, I think, was from a examiner who wrote well, it actually went to the examination report came to me, and then I wrote to the examiner. The examiner said in their examiner's report that this MRes thesis that they had examined was the highest quality bit of research they had examined or read by a student in 30 years under the level of PhD. So much better than MA honours, a BA honours, MA, and they really extolled the virtue of the research. And when speaking to the supervisor and then the student on graduation day, they said that the BPhil was no doubt for them the basis on which they were able to really write an excellent thesis. And they went on to do a PhD as well, and completed at the end of last year. So they're the sort of examples, best examples I can give, I think.
I think that's excellent feedback. Yeah. No, I think that's really excellent feedback, and it's really great to see those different directions that people can take from after the MRS as well. Look, I think these were our main questions. I was wondering if was there anything else that you would say to someone considering doing the MRS maybe, or if you had any other advice?
Well, the advice I think is always to start at the department level and speak to the people who have taught you, who may have research areas or have taught you in subjects that you've really felt some passion about, and start talking about the possibility of doing a project with that person. And then if that starts to sort of gel, then to go and speak to your MRes director in your department. Because it's those conversations. I mean, the one thing I've found is that it's the passion about a topic that is the most important ingredient for a student's success. They get all this other stuff out of it, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the passion to do a topic, if there's something that drives you, that really interests you, I think that's really the initial step, the first little thing that starts it all off.
That's right.
And, in the middle of the night when you're thinking, I'm writing my thesis instead of being out with my friends, that's what gets you through and gets you to the end. And that's certainly been the experience of a lot of people I've spoken to. So start those conversations, and if you need any advice about how to apply, then that's something you can bring to my office, which is the Arts MRes office.
Okay, that's great. And start with passion. I also really like this advice. I think it's perfect when you start as a researcher. That's your starting point. Thank you so much, Noah, for your time and answering our questions. This was really great. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Ava.